Welcome back to the Tone-Based Beginning Guitar course. Today, we are going to learn about the structure and function of the left hand, including terminology of the fingers, where and how to fret a note, and cover a few exercises and do's and don'ts in the fretting of notes on the fingerboard. Let's start with the terminology of the fingers of the left hand. We'll be dealing with 4 specific fingers on this hand. Your left index finger, which we will call finger number 1, your left middle finger, which we will be calling finger number 2, left ring finger, finger number 3, and left pinky, finger number 4. Your left thumb will be used for support of the activity of your left hand fingers on the fingerboard. The first thing that we need to discuss in regard to the left hand is the basic shape that we are trying to maintain. Remember, the guitar rewards relaxation and comfort, so we need to find the left hand technique that will allow us to play cleanly and accurately as well as comfortably. And for that, I aim for this shape here, the letter C. Now I want you to notice a few things about my letter C here in particular. Notice that my left thumb is flat and my fingers are all curled, with the fingertip going directly down into the thumb at a perpendicular angle. These are the first 2 elements that we need to perfect in our letter C. And I understand that some folks' hands are built differently. For example, I have a double jointed thumb that I need to account for. And some folks may not be able to flex their thumb as flat as I can. So we want to try and get the left hand thumb as flat as possible and the fingers as perpendicular to the thumb as possible. Once you're comfortable with this shape, I'd like you to rotate your letter C so it's facing you. But for the sake of this exercise, I will rotate it to face you. So, notice here that my thumb is placed in between my middle and ring fingers. This is going to provide balance and reach for the left hand when I need it later on. And finally, notice that all of my left hand fingers have a little bit of space in between them. This will allow the fingers to move much more freely on the fingerboard. Now I know there are physiological differences between some of our hand structures, and some folks may not be able to reach their thumb all the way to the second and third finger like I can. And that's fine. We want to try and aim for this middle finger here, and some folks may only be able to reach between their first and second finger. That's all right. The key here is balance. The last thing that we want is for our thumb to be sticking way out here. Keep the thumb in the middle of the hand and balance the fingers around it. Now back in the essential equipment lesson, I talked about the importance of the pencil and how it is the most valuable tool in a musician's arsenal. Today we're going to use a pencil for a less than designed exercise, and that is to test the shape of our left hand. Notice here that I'm balancing the pencil between my thumb and fingers, with the fingertips touching the top of the pencil and the pad of the thumb touching the bottom. If I remove the pencil, you'll see I'm not pressing very hard to maintain that shape at all. I just want to work on the balance of the hand, not the force. Once I have this shape, I'm going to go ahead and rotate my wrist so that it's staring me right in the face, thumb flat, fingers curled. I'm going to put the pencil right next to the fingerboard. And notice I'm still maintaining my balance. I've not changed the angle or position of my left hand whatsoever. And next, I'm going to remove the pencil and place, barely touching, all of my left hand fingers on the first string. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the left hand shape we are aspiring for. Now that we have our left hand shape, let's talk about how we are going to create tone using the left hand. So for this example, I'm only going to be using my left index finger. So my other fingers are just slightly off the string. I don't want them sticking out into outer space. We're going to need these fingers eventually, so we're going to keep them close but not touching. And as you can see here, I'm only touching the first finger to the string and producing no tone. Notice, if I get these fingers out of the way, where my left index finger is located on the fret. It is located at the very bottom, as close to the fret wire as possible to produce the cleanest tone. The analogy that I like to use is that it's like the prize in my cereal box when I was growing up. The prize is always at the bottom, just like the best sound. Now, once we have that finger set up, let's work about how to create tone. A mistake that I see with a lot of beginning guitar players is that they think they need to squeeze the left hand in order to produce a tone. And that's not true. Remember, the guitar rewards relaxation and comfort. If we're forcing the note with the left hand, we're going to cause ourselves some physical pain, and we're going to work a lot harder than we have to. And I don't want you doing either of those things. Rather, we're going to use what I call the 40-40-20 principle. And that just refers to the distribution of what force comes from where in fretting a note. Now, the first 40 is our bicep. The biggest flexing muscle in the assemblage from our shoulder to our fingertips is our bicep. And before we incorporate the thumb at all in pressing a note, we're just going to flex the bicep ever so slightly to depress the index finger onto that fret there. The next 40% is the force of gravity acting on your elbow and on your shoulder. So the string will actually catch your finger as it's trying to fall to the ground. Keeping in mind, folks, we still have not included the thumb yet. Finally, for additional support, you may provide a little bit of back pressure from the left thumb. So 40% of the work is being done by the bicep, 40% of the work is being done by the force of gravity acting on your shoulder and your elbow, and 20% is being provided by the support of your left thumb. Before we start trying to fret individual notes, I want to notice one quick detail about my left hand setup. My thumb is flat on the back of the fingerboard, and my fingers are all above the strings. Notice that my big knuckles here are parallel to the line of the fingerboard. This is the position that we are aiming for. We want to avoid flaring the hand in any one direction or the other because it puts our fingers at a disadvantage. So our neutral left hand position should have our thumb flat and flush on the back of the fingerboard, the fingers curled with the fingertips touching the strings, and the big knuckles of your left hand parallel to the angle of the fingerboard. Now that we understand the distribution of force, let's make some music. I'm going to start by once again placing my left index finger on the first fret of the first string. And if I were to pluck with how hard I'm pressing, I get no tone. The goal here is to set up and establish how little pressure is required in order to create a tone on the fingerboard. So, with my 40-40-20 principle in mind and this barely touching of the first fret of the first string, I'm going to slowly apply pressure until I get a tone, playing rest stroke with index and middle finger on the first string. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I do not have to press any harder than that in order to create a tone. As a matter of fact, pressing harder than this may negatively impact your pitch, altering your tuning. And once I have that first finger comfortable, let's try with the second finger. Lovely. Moving on, let's try the third finger. And finally, the fourth finger. Now, it's not important to understand what those pitches are at the moment. We want to become comfortable with the motion of fretting a note. We will discuss the names of these pitches and how they are to be played in the near future. One thing that I want you to be aware of is the spacing of your fingers as you go through this thud exercise. Notice that as I move from one fret to another, I am not opening up my hand or flaring my fingers out. This creates unnecessary strain on the left hand. Rather, I'm just slightly shifting my left hand position in order to get to the bottom of each fret. So I encourage you, do not reach across to try and hit all 4 frets within one left hand position. Rather, make these small shifts from one fret to the next in order to make sure that your hand is comfortable, that you're not reaching, and that you produce solid tone at the bottom of each fret. In lieu of going to the practice room for this lesson, I encourage you to work on this thud exercise on your own. Thud, slowly apply pressure until you get a pitch. And don't be afraid to move across to different strings to try it, from the second string to the third string to the fourth string, etc. For our listening and appreciation this week, I encourage you to look at the contemporary Cuban composer Leo Brouwer. Leo Brouwer is one of the living legends of the classical guitar world, and we are lucky enough at Tonebase to have several lessons provided by him, including his piece Un Día de Noviembre and his Estudios Sencillos. For an example of his more concert-level repertoire, I encourage you to look at Brouwer's El Decameron Negro. In summation, we learned about the basic structure and function of the left hand as it pertains to the guitar. We learned how to shape our hand in the letter C shape, how to fret individual notes, where to place our fingers, and the thud note exercise, which I encourage you all to practice ahead of our next lesson. We will be applying the techniques that we learned today in our next lesson, in which we discuss how to play notes on the first and second strings of the guitar. I'm looking forward to seeing you all then.